So how can we emphasize again the problematic issue? You problematize the issue based on the context. What do you mean by that? Always a difficulty actually of writing the background of the study, the first paragraph, is that oftentimes when we problematize, ang problema, it's quite general. It's no longer based on the context. Nawawala siya. That is why when we problematize the issue, always go back to the context. Kasi if it's quite general, let's say for example, if you go back dito sa, say for example, asan na yung, this one, for DB for example, self-medicate, huwag na lang yan, dito tayo sa title. Okay. For this one actually is survey kasi ito. Okay. For this one kasi, this title, this is survey. Okay. So when you write background of the study for this one, for a survey, automatically you talk about self-medication. Hindi ka na concerned, you're no longer concerned about dependent variable kasi wala ka namang dependent variable kasi nga siya, yan ay survey. Okay? So, you problematize, you go back to the context about the issue, you contextualize always. Although we have a rule about international, national, local, yes, we have that one. Pero when you write actually in the proposal, it doesn't mean naman kasi na international mo imo ibutang sa first paragraph. It doesn't mean pag national mo imo sa second. Actually, hindi. Not necessarily. What's important is that you were able to give the encompassing or the perspective to your reader that this problem is not just present in the Philippines but also in other countries. In the Philippines, specifically in this particular city. So, naklaro yung contextualization. Why is that necessary when you do the background of the study? Because you're also going to emphasize the gap. Okay? So, when you try to emphasize the gap, if you do not present internationally, nationally, and locally the literatures about the problematic issue, then it would mean you cannot emphasize the gap. You cannot really convince your reader na may gap. Kasi nga, your literature simply is limited only to that particular context. Wala siyang iba. And it's impossible that it's not being studied in other countries or in another context. But then again, you have to make sure that in the first paragraph, you have to problematize based on the context, sa issue in the context. Okay, like I said, provide statistical data and provide literature. Although in some quali studies, when they do background of the study, always in some journal, they allowed na yung first paragraph is more of a reflection of the researcher based on his or her experience. So, walang cited literature. But then again, actually, if you're going to be strict with it, there should always be a literature in the first paragraph to emphasize the problem because it might be, kumbaga, it's like saying, you cannot say na that problem that you have seen or you have experienced is a problem na ikaw lang unique na experience mo, which is not true actually. It's also being experienced by other people. It's been studied already. Baka kulang ka lang siguro ng review of literature kaya hindi ka nakakuha ng citation or baka hindi mo nakita yung ibang study. That is why there's a need to really cite. It's not good in the background of the study that you have a one paragraph with no citation. Okay? Kasi yan, more or less, imposible na sa kanya lahat yun. I'm sure that researcher benchmark also based on the other journals. Nabasa niya yun. Okay? It's just that the researcher failed to document the process. Kung he was not able to write the references. That is why when you do review of literature, always, pag mag-open ka ng site, always copy-paste doon kay reference. For example, self-medication. Ang kasi dito is automatic, you can actually copy-paste, manggod. I-copy paste mo siya automatic sa baba, it would mean every time we open, pag i-open natin yan siya, automatic maka-document mo, nasa baba lahat yan siya. So it would mean that when you write your background of the study, you always have to make sure kung 10 lang yung na-cite mo doon sa taas, dapat 10 na po ang nasa baba na references when you started your background of the study. It's not good that you have 10 na naka-cited, 23 ang imuhang references sa baba, mali yan siya. Kasi kung ano lang yung na-cite, dapat yun lang yung nasa references. Okay? And it's not true that nabasa mo, halimbawa, nabasa mo, nakuha mo yung idea on that particular study, pero you use this particular study instead, hindi mo na siya isinali doon sa pag-cite sa background of the study, pero gisali mo siya sa references. Dapat, gisali mo din siya doon sa citation. Okay? Dapat ilagay mo talaga siya. So, dapat kung ano yung number of cited na mga references mo in the background of the study, it should be the same number in the references. Okay? And then, ang checking kasi, madali when you do Google Scholar. Even sa atin na na yung sa EBSCO natin, madali din po siya. Kasi, ma-copy-paste man din gihapon ng iyahang mga citations. So, dali lang siya actually. Okay? Okay. Now, what's important also in the background of the study is that the discussions are not repeated in the different paragraphs. Okay, di siya magbalik-balik. And how are we going to make sure na di siya magbalik-balik? Again, you follow the flow. If you have the literature about the DV in the quantity, then do not mention the DV, again, another literature in another paragraph. If you mention the DV, again, it should be the DV and the IV and the DV. It should not be repeated in other paragraphs. Okay? Now, what if you were given a draft of a background of the study wherein there are a lot of repeated na mga discussions of a certain variable, then you have to choose. Ano ang gusto niya ipa-emphasize sa bata? In the other paragraph that mentions the same, that talks about the same variable, then they have to transfer na lang doon sa review of related literature nila. Okay? Kasi when we tell kasi a story, we do not go back to the same. Dili ta paligwilig. We have to be direct. Kasi when we write the background of the study, we have to be direct. So when we are going to be direct, naturally, you start with the problem. You convince your reader right away na ito yung problema. Okay? Kaya that's why I'm writing this one. Ito yung problem. Okay? The literature would say na ito yung study so far. The gap would say na ito pa naman ang hindi pa na-studyhan. Okay? Now, this is an example of a gap of the study. Okay? Copy-paste ko din yung paragraph na yan. Okay? Oftentimes kasi we always ask during the defense sa mga estudyante, saan dyan ang gap of the study nyo? Yan, that's the gap. That's the paragraph where you can actually see the gap of the study. Okay? So, numerous studies. Okay, take note. In here, the paragraph started saying there are numerous studies. Now, take note, you cannot say there are numerous studies if in the background of the study, before this paragraph, you have not cited the studies. Okay? Dapat meron kang studies. That's the point there why you have the literature. Okay? So, numerous studies conducted about self-medication. Okay? Kasi nag-mention ka sa before the gap, before this paragraph. Okay. However, the researchers found out that there is no study specifically on the prevalence of self-medication among pharmacy students involving universities or colleges in Davao City, Philippines. Okay. So what are the keywords now or statement to emphasize the gap of the study? Again, this is the paragraph that contains the gap of the study. Early na no study.
Okay.
Opo. But the next question is it appropriate to say no study? Hindi. Okay, we do not say no study. Because nga, di ba, you've mentioned already in the previous paragraph several studies kasi you said numerous studies.
Pero pero Doc Mon, gi-qualify
Yes
nila
po.
dito sa sunod na words among pharmacy students dito sa university. Baka yun ang kanila ibig sabihin. It should have been reworded probably, no? Para hindi naman lumabas yung no study kaagad. Di ba? Kasi
Yes po.
this was referring actually to a study that was conducted para sa pharmacy students in UIC. Something like that.
Opo.
Parang ganun.
Opo. Actually, if you're going to look at this one, the no study, okay lang siya because you have the contextualization in pharmacy UIC. Okay? Pero actually, when you look into several journals, different researches, even if you try to contextualize the gap already, you do not say actually no studies.
Mhm.
Okay? As much as possible, we do not use the word no in emphasizing the gap. Okay? The first sentence here that says numerous study, this is actually correct if you have actually presented the numerous studies. Now, what are other ways that you can actually add after this sentence to emphasize the gap of the study, aside from seeing no study contextually in UIC pharmacy na conducted? What can be what can be added as a sentence? You can actually emphasize, okay, wait. You can actually emphasize, okay, you can actually emphasize saying that uh, most of the studies conducted focuses on, doon na, pwede ka na mag-contextualize na usually it's done in uh, saan? Sa anong, it could be na sa hospitals ang setting ba? Or you can focus on the design. The studies conducted are basically survey or it's quali siya. So you're conducting quanti, mga ganon. You can emphasize the gap that way. Okay? But we do not use again the word no, but we can say limited. But for this one, since ni-contextualize siya kaagad as pharmacy UIC, more or less okay lang siya. Pero you can actually do better na hindi you remove the no study. You remove the no study to somehow allow also a leeway that maybe may possibility that maybe there might be studies already, okay, conducted by pharmacy students but not really in UIC college in Davao City, or might be na may nakaano na hindi nga lang mga ganun ba, mga ganun na mga possibilities. But for this one, safe siya kasi i-contextualize niya. But then again, for this one, since you started with a very good sentence on numerous studies conducted about self-medication, you can emphasize the gap better by stating ano yung the gap based on the design, the gap based on the groupings ba, okay? The gap based on variables that have not been included yet in the studies about self-medication, for example, okay? Or the gap self-medication that it's done, like for example, ngayon, pandemic, COVID-19 yan. Okay, you can emphasize that gap in that way. Okay, then again, we should not use the word no study. Okay,